Hello everyone, my name is Techno and today we are going to be talking about what to do at an interview. Hopefully after this video you'll know what to expect during an interview and how to respond to those interview questions. I am speaking from my own personal experience, so what works for me may not work for you. Interviews can be a little bit scary. You sit down and you have a one-on-one with your future manager. During this interview, it's an exchange of understanding each other. You get to understand a little bit more about the company culture. You get to understand a little bit more of who you're working with and your roles and responsibilities. And on the flip side, they'll be viewing you as a good candidate for the company or not. They'll be able to see, is your personality great? Is your skill where it needs to be in order to take on responsibilities with the role? And they'll also be able to determine who you are as an individual. So going back to my previous video, the first thing that's going to happen is the interviewer is going to take a look at your resume. They'll take a look at 3 categories. The first one being experience, the second being education, and the third being certifications. These are not in order. These are just a few of the things that most employers tend to take a look at, and they want to make sure that you are who you say you are, that you're not lying about your skills or your experience. You get placed into 3 different categories. Number 1 being a physical interview, where you show up into the office and have a one-on-one interview with your hiring manager. Or number 2, you go into a Zoom meeting with that hiring manager. Or number 3, some companies might do this first, where they actually have HR call you and screen you first before even giving you that interview. So once you identify which category you're placed in, the next thing that you should focus on is the interview questions. When you take a look at the interview questions, typically you can find this on Glassdoor.com. You look at the company that you applied to. There are going to be some users out there who already post those interview questions, which will help you understand more about the role, as well as what questions the hiring manager might throw at you. If this is HR having a phone screen with you, they're going to call you at some point in time or at the agreed time on the email, and they'll say, hey, my name is blah, 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 blah. Here's what you need to know about the company. Tell me a little bit more of yourself. And then they'll probably ask you on your education, your certification. They'll probably ask you more questions on dealing with people, because typically in, for example, entry-level help desk jobs, you're going to be facing a lot of customers where they might be super angry at you and you'll have to de-escalate the situation. So HR wants to know, how do you handle that situation? How do you handle stress? When you're interviewing and you're answering questions, you want to make sure that you answer everything in a STAR format. I've mentioned this in my previous video, but to just recap over it, STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. Once you answer it in the STAR format, it shouldn't take more than a minute or 2 to answer the question completely. Obviously, this will depend on the question. So if it's a technical question, you want to make sure that you can answer it in depth to the point where the employer understands where you're going, but at the same time, don't make it too long to the point where they'll get bored and tired of listening to your story. If you have all these different stories that are ready for each and every single interview question, I am positive that you'll be extremely successful on your interview. That's basically interviewing in a nutshell. Depending on how your interview goes, if your employer likes you, they'll either bring you on board as soon as possible, or if there's multiple rounds, you'll have to do the same thing again, but in the future rounds. You might interview with different people, you might interview with the entire team. All of it might be a little bit different, but bottom line, interviewing is still the same. So I want to really stress out to you that interviewing is a skill. You cannot walk into an interview expecting that you'll pass and ace everything without preparation whatsoever. What should you expect during this remote or physical interview? Well, the first thing that you should do is groom yourself, dress for success, and focus on your appearance. For example, most IT help desk jobs are business casual, or some may want you to be in a suit. This all depends on your employer, and you can probably find out more on what to wear based on the company website, and probably if you look around for pictures, you'll find something that most people tend to wear. So if it's business casual, great, you have it easy. If not, you'll have to wear either a suit and tie or a button-up shirt with khakis. Next thing to focus on is your resume. A lot of people tend to just walk to interviews and think that they'll ace it no problem. But the problem is, if you're not prepared, you won't be prepared for the interview. I can't stress this enough. You need to really study the interview questions and study your resume. Once you study your resume, you just know what's on there. So the moment the employer asks you any question, you already have an answer ready for them. This applies to both going into an interview in person as well as remote or on Zoom, because they're very similar to each other. Now, the only difference that I would say is your environment, right? In person, you get to have that eye-to-eye contact. When you give them your good first impression, you tend to look more of a superstar compared to somebody on Zoom where all they have to work with is just a little square box with you inside, and your range of motion is very limited because you have to make sure that your body language can be shown on screen. Compared to in the office, you can actually show your range of motion. You can show hand movement. You can show eye contact. It feels a lot more personable when you're interviewing in person than it does on Zoom or remote. One thing to differentiate is on the Zoom meeting, you want to make sure that your lighting is good, because if your lighting is really bad or it's too bright, you just look super strange in camera, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that you have the first good impression from your employer and that they really understand that you mean business, okay? So number one is good camera lighting. The next thing is camera angle. This is important because it looks like you're looking down on the employer, and you don't want that. You want to make sure that your camera is set up eye to eye, similar to what we have right now on camera, but what you also don't want is for your camera to be higher than your face, because if it's higher than your face, when you look at the screen, it also makes it look like the employer is looking down on you. So make sure camera lighting looks good, as well as camera angle. And so the final thing to do after being super prepared on interview questions, knowing what's on your resume, dressing for success, the last thing to do is just to be yourself. You don't want to pretend to be somebody, okay? Some people lie on their resume, it happens, right? But if you lie on your resume, the employer can see that you're lying. And it's not that hard to really grill somebody, especially in the IT industry. If they ask you some technical questions and you are just BSing it, they'll know that you're lying, and then boom, you're off of the list and they'll look for another candidate. So now that you know the do's, let me tell you the don'ts. You want to make sure that you're not late, okay? Being late is a no-go because it tells the employer that you're not capable of showing up on time, or that you tend to procrastinate, or you just tend to be a person who likes to delay. And why would an employer want to risk hiring somebody who shows up late for the interview when they can hire somebody who shows up on time, if not earlier? If you have two candidates and one shows up early and one shows up late, the right choice is to choose the person that showed up early. If you show up late, you're probably just off the list. So keep that in mind. Thank you so much for watching my video. If it was helpful to you, like and subscribe so I can make more content like this, so that way you can accelerate your cloud journey. My name is Techno, and have a great rest of your day. Peace.